thank you all for coming and for coming so early. This time slot is kind of an experiment. We've never offered it this early before, so we thought we'd try it to see how many people could squeeze in some professional development before classes. So thank you all for being here so early. So this idea came from last semester in my own classes. I had some issues with group work. I found myself a lot thinking, I wish I could tell my students how to communicate better in their groups, to be more assertive and ask for what they need from their group members. And then I got a call from Susie Townsend, the librarian who's here with us today, saying that faculty members had also talked to her about similar issues. And she mentioned that she had seen a lightning talk with Dewana Horn, who's on our panel, who has researched group issues and group work, and it was about this very issue of groups and classes. So thank you to all of our panel presenters for being here. We have people from different disciplines, so hopefully we'll have kind of a rounded talk about group issues, group interaction. So I'm just going to read you a little bit about each presenter. We switched order a little bit, so I'm having to find it. So Desiree Patterson is a student assistant in our center, in the Center for Faculty Excellence and the Institute for Women's Health. She's a TWU Honors Scholar graduate and currently is a master's student in the Exercise and Sports Nutrition program. As an undergraduate and graduate student, she has led and assisted on several research projects ranging in topics of exercise intervention, vitamin status, and protein supplementation. So Desi's going to be our student perspective today. And then we have Dr. Larry Carter, who's kind enough to fill in for Denise Lucero Miller. She was called down to Houston, so thank you for coming in on such short notice. Dr. Carter is a licensed psychologist and the coordinator of the CAPS, which is Counseling and Psychology Services, right? Group therapy program. He received his PhD in counseling psychology from Texas Women's University in 2011. His clinical interests include working with issues related to LGBTQIA populations and first-generation college students, eating disorders, body image disturbances, feminist multicultural concerns, and clinical supervision and training. And then we have Dr. Dewana Horn, who has traveled up here from Houston. She's an associate professor in management in the School of Management. She teaches graduate business courses at the Houston campus and has an active research agenda in organizational behavior. In her research, she examines individual characteristics such as attitude, personality, values, and leadership traits, individual processes such as perceptions, job engagement, and career decision-making, and the influence these factors have on individuals, teams, and organizations. And we have Dr. Sandra Westmoreland, who's an associate professor in the Department of Biology at TWU. In addition to teaching biology courses, she also directs the TWU graduate and undergraduate science teacher education programs. One emphasis of Dr. Westmoreland's current research is related to the use of active engagement, teaching, and learning strategies to enhance students' critical thinking as well as team-based learning. So each presenter will speak for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a good chunk of about 30 minutes at the end for Q&A. So, please.
All right. So, like Aubrey mentioned, I also got my undergraduate from here, so I'm starting my 6th year here as a student at TWU. And all throughout my time, I worked on smaller class assignments, class projects, or on a larger scale, worked on several research projects, and I've, like she mentioned, both led and assisted on these projects. So I've learned to work with other individuals who have different personalities, who have different schedules, who have different work ethics, especially where motivation is concerned. But I believe 2 things that are critical to the success of group work are role definition and constant communication. When students know what their role is and know what the expectations are in a group, then that gives them a goal to focus on and work towards while simultaneously relying on trusting their group members to fulfill their role and their expectations. Each member has an integral role and a unique set of strengths that contribute to the success of the project as well as the group as a whole. Some group experiences go smoothly, some not so much. I found personally that when a student struggle, a problem arises, and they're not quite sure how to resolve that conflict, especially if it may not necessarily be about the project, but with working with someone. And they don't necessarily want to bring it up because they don't want to be penalized for it. And so they just work through it and they just deal with it and get through the project. And problems can be due to a number of things, whether it's someone not fulfilling their part, communication isn't going well, or simply just something isn't working out in the project. when working in groups, it can be difficult to know what is the appropriate way to handle a situation, because each situation is different. So do I handle it on the spot, or do I give it a few days, see if the problem kind of resolves itself, or should I go to my instructor or my project advisor and bring it up to them and then ask them how to handle it? So that, I also believe that instructors and advisors, they play a key role in group success as well. One, simply providing tools to students, how to resolve conflict, and then others simply just being approachable. Because I know it's like, how am I going to be perceived if I go to an instructor? Is that going to give them, are they going to look at me negatively after that? Because no one wants to be a tattletale, especially when we're all adults and we're supposed to be able to work together. And we know that we're going to be working in groups for the rest of our lives and our careers, and so we just don't want it to put a negative view on us. So sometimes we just simply want to express, what we're feeling too, without judgment. And so, like I mentioned, we need to know kind of what the appropriate steps to take to resolve a conflict. And working on a research project, I ended up going to my professor and talking to her and saying, hey, can we just meet as a group? And that just gave us a common space to express what each of us were feeling, and not, that way it wouldn't end up during our research time kind of blowing up in our faces. So that way we just had a set aside time with our professor and our group members, and we could just talk through everything. And that helped. And after that, everything went fine after that. We established, more mutual respect for each other, because, one was heading the project and knew what was going on, while myself and another group member, we were still learning the protocol. We were still learning the skills, and so we didn't feel respected during that time when it was kind of expected that we would just know everything and just take it on. And then had also negative experiences in an undergrad. Ended up keeping documentation of communication with myself and other group members. We had a group member that did not adhere to our previously agreed upon meeting schedule, and that it was a practical in our lab, and so we had to practice as a group before it came to the actual testing time. And because they weren't there, the other group member and myself, we weren't able to practice as much, and so we felt it was negatively impacting, the skills that we were trying to learn, as well as we had a written portion with it. And because they weren't meeting with us, myself and the other group member, we ended up having to rewrite that portion because it didn't flow well with the stuff that because we were working on it together, it just didn't fit in, and so we ended up having to rewrite it. And especially it came to the point of they had sent a really rude text message, and so I screenshotted it and I sent it to the instructor and the overseeing professor, and I just wanted to present the situation, just want to let you know this is what's happened. And thankfully it never went anywhere, but there's some situations where it can just be resolved, just sitting and talking, but other times it requires keeping documentation of everything. I think students also, they don't always realize that they can do that, but also know this is a situation where this is warranted, and then this is the situation where more severe cases where this type of resolution is warranted. So just kind of to conclude, knowing one's roles and expectations, how to communicate effectively, knowing how to resolve conflict, and know when a student can comfortably approach an instructor or an advisor with a problem are all critical to helping students succeed, especially when they're expected to work in groups inside and outside of the classroom.
I'll jump in. But I do want to say hi again. I'm Larry. Because I am brand new here, I've only been here 2 weeks now. So I'm kind of glad I got to meet some people. Anytime I get out of my office, it's like a good time. But I have a whole bunch of handouts here. And because I just did step in for Dr. Lucero Miller, so it's kind of like, okay, you got a day. What are you going to do? So I know that Dr. Horn is going to cover some of this, so I won't cover that part of it, but you'll have it just in case you think you might want to, it might be useful. And then I'm going to concentrate on 2 other pieces. So when I was thinking back, I just sort of did a similar thing. I was like, okay, yeah, group work. Let me think back about my experiences of group work. And what I remembered was this class, I think it was an undergrad class, I think in speech or something. And I remember that we had a group and somebody just kind of disappeared. And then I remember one of the other group members was like, kind of like talking them down, you know, like, and I was like, yeah, they're awful, whatever. But then about 2 weeks later, then suddenly that dynamic shifted a little bit more, and then suddenly that other second individual disappeared. And so like, yes, there we go. So the place that I want to focus on is really on a couple, they're kind of two sides to the same coin. And that's really based on communication. So I gave you 3 handouts. One of them starts at the top where it's, this is from the Carnegie Mellon Everly Center for Teaching Excellence and Educational Innovation. And this is really about, and I left the link to it up there, and this is taken like literally copy and pasted directly from their site, so I'm not taking credit for this work at all. But you can visit it if you find that it's interesting. And it's really kind of give you some ideas about ways that you might, before the group work begins, structure it in a way that will help it be more successful. So, and again, I know you're going to be covering a lot of that information, so I won't really spend a whole lot of time there. But one of the things that I did think was really interesting, and again, there's a link at the bottom that can take you there if you're interested in it. But this is a team contract template, and even though as you look at it, it's not a very sophisticated document in any way. I mean, it's just kind of bullet points, a few things that maybe it'd be good for group members to talk about before they dive right in. Because inevitably in groups, and I know you all know this, in your classes, something's gonna go wrong. Maybe not in every group, maybe only in one group, but it's definitely gonna go wrong somewhere along the way. And so, you know, what if you can plan ahead a little bit, knowing that that's the potential, then maybe you can kind of stave it off a little bit. So that's the group contract. So this is only one on the website. I think this is from Carnegie Mellon as well. Yeah. There's another version that's a little more fleshed out. So what I am going to use my time to talk about is really about communication with the intent to focus on conflict resolution. So about halfway back in the biggest packet, page, it's on the 3rd page. On the back of the 2nd page, excuse me, it talks about assertiveness, communication skills. So, and then the last handout that I have here is from our own counseling center, is how to be a good listener. And I think for conflict resolution, you kind of have to be good at both of those things. You both have to know how to express yourself in a way that's clear and that the other person can actually receive the message that you're trying to communicate. But you also have to be able to be a good listener and have those skills so that you're able actually to listen to what the other person is saying. So I'm going to talk about assertiveness, communication skills first, and they just have some, again, these are like bullet point. This is not in depth by any means, but the importance of using I statements, sort of like to keep the focus rather than blaming or focusing on behavior of the other individual that you didn't like at the very beginning. You really start with you and how you were impacted. So a typical script for something like this, and when I work with it for assertiveness, it would be like the I language is when you blank, whatever they did. I felt, so this is your response, and then you say what I need or want for the resolution to it. So that's a really good structured way, particularly for students who aren't necessarily accustomed or skillful at being assertive on their own. That's a nice kind of heuristic to have. So when they're really upset and they're scared and nervous and mad all at the same time, they can kind of go to that, like kind of go a 3-step process, very structured. Structure helps when you're learning new skills. So that's a one tip that can be really helpful. The second is empathy, to really try to do your best to empathize with the other individual. Blame is easy, right? Empathy is a little bit harder. So, as you're thinking about how to interact with this person, really try to understand where they're coming from or what might be going on in their life that might explain it. I mean, it could be just as simple like, oh, I just found out that one of my close relatives was diagnosed with cancer. And those two things feel very differently. I think I would react very differently to those two things. So try to do your best to understand what's happening and where it's coming from. Then it's okay to ask for more time. If you're communicating with someone and you don't have a good, strong sense of what it is that you need to express or how to express it, then it's okay to come back to it, right? Because when you do communicate with the person, you don't want to do it hastily or say something that you might regret or communicate something that might get misunderstood. It's better to wait and really feel like you have a good sense of what you're trying to communicate. So when you do it, like I said, in the heat of the moment where you do have emotions coming up, then you can do it in a way that better reflects your intentions. And the last couple of tips here are really great. It's just about being consistent. So these are tips that will help you to communicate the message in a way that reflects your intentions. So a lot of times when people are having sort of a confrontation situation with another classmate or whatever, what they'll do is they'll use hedging words. So like they use the word just to add in, it kind of takes the power away. Or they will use verbs that are less powerful and less direct. And so when you are trying to communicate something to someone, then it's really important that your verbs be clear. So if it's something that you want, it's okay to say that you want it. If it's something that you intend to do, it's okay to say, I will do this, rather than use hedging words. And then be a broken record, I think is kind of self-explanatory. It's just, if you don't believe that the person, the individual that you're trying to communicate with is really getting and receiving the message that you're trying to communicate, it's okay to say it again. If they aren't able to hear it, then it's okay to kind of change it up and try to say it in a different way that they might be able to understand. But the repetition can help, because like those emotions are kind of can run high on both ends, and so it's not just the individual that's initiating the conversation, but also the one on the other end that also might be clouded with some sort of internal processes that are going on as well. So definitely don't think twice about repeating yourself, being a broken record. And in terms of scripting, they just have some ideas about like what it is that you might want to include in the message that you convey. So the event, again, this is sort of similar to that 3-step I statement form. Structure is really, really helpful, again, because those emotions can really it's like static, and it's hard for you to focus and make sure that you stay on message when you are trying to, a lot of your psychological resources are there, trying to just manage your own emotional state. So the event, your feelings, your needs, and the consequences. If you can hit those 4 things, then you're doing pretty good. So this is how to communicate, and then the handout that I gave you from our own counseling center talks about how to be a good listener. And this is a skill I think a lot of Americans really could use a little bit more of, because I think we're much better talkers than we are listeners by and large. So, I love this handout. I love that we have it, and I can get you some more of these if you like them. But it's not bad stuff to know. And so it starts out with a description of what is active listening. Remind you to make eye contact, take a listening position, focus on your nonverbals. As you're listening, there's nonverbal behaviors that you can engage in that indicate to the other person that you're listening, that you're with them. And those can be like, it's leaning forward, your shoulders squared to them, and then a lot of nodding is both it indicates your understanding, and it's also an encourager for them to continue going. So that kind of helps. And then you can do it verbally by letting them know they understood what they said by paraphrasing it back. So when someone, does give you a response, then rather than just respond to their statement. You can start it out by paraphrasing what they said so that they understand that you were attending to them, and then respond that way. It's a kind of a twofold kind of message. If you don't understand what's happening here, then don't be afraid to ask questions. Provide feedback. Again, empathize shows up on this list too. And then be open, because the communication may not go in the direction that you necessarily believe that it will. You each come to that interaction with different goals, or some of which you may know, some of which you may not know. So be open, just let the conversation unfold as it is, and respond the best way you can in that moment. And then just be aware of some blocks to listening. So these are like obstacles right here at the end. Distractions, interruptions, silent counter arguments where you withhold your response rather than share it as part of the dialogue. Making assumptions, and then being overly controlled of the interaction, right? Some people, particularly when they're really anxious, what they'll do is kind of dominate the conversation. So they'll speak rapidly and at length as a means to sort of like fend off against whatever response might be coming. So anyway, these are some obstacles to be aware of. And what I've experienced just in my work with clients directly is just creating a space where you can talk about these things before an interaction happens can really, really help them be more effective and get out of that conversation what they'd like to get out.
Good morning. I'm going to talk from just a slightly different perspective. I've been teaching MBA courses for the past 6 years here at TWU, and I came to TWU as a fairly new PhD, and with not a whole lot of teaching experience. I had taught 3 years before at the undergraduate level. So I came to TWU and TWU Houston, teaching in an executive MBA program, which means that I'm teaching people who are either already executives across different industries, or they are planning to be, they wish to advance to be executives. And so my classes were really large. I teach the capstone course in the executive MBA program. And so it's a strategic management course. It's the course where the students are expected to integrate everything that they've learned across the MBA program. So everything that they've learned in marketing, human resource management, just all the classes, finance, accounting, and to apply them in a project at the end. So the project that they're doing 2 projects. One is a business simulation project where they act as managers of a company, and it's an online actual business simulation, online simulation type of deal. And then the other project is to create a 5-year strategic business plan in teams. So both of these projects are in teams. And just to let you know how overwhelming this was for me, I had like 100 students in my class, which means that I had teams of 5 to 7 students. That's how it had been taught before me. So in any given semester, I could have 15, 16 groups to manage. And no one had ever taught me how to teach in teams. That's just one of the things that they don't, when you're getting your PhD, you're learning the content of your discipline. Rarely do PhD programs have a teaching methodology class, which we did have a teaching methodology class, but the class was more focused on, how to present in front of the classroom and, some, basic classroom management things. It did not go into any detail about how to teach in teams. And my field is, business management, and I focus on organizational behavior with my research. And teams is a concept under organizational behavior, but it just wasn't my area of interest. So I had no experience with teams. So here I am in a classroom with these executives looking at me and feeling like I should be the expert on teams. And so I had to quickly learn through experience and through research, how to manage these teams. So what I did after about 2 years of just kind of trial and error and just being thrown into the pond, I attended the Pioneer Teaching and Learning Academy, and they asked, what are some problems you have in your class, and they want you to develop a research agenda around those problems. So of course, teams was my problem. That was my problem. So I started doing research on how to manage teams in the classroom. So I came up the research, just by looking at all the literature and everything. There are 10 suggestions that help. A lot of it I had already experienced. Some of it I had not experienced, so it shed light for me. So I'm going to share these suggestions with you. Number one is emphasize the importance and relevance of working in teams. So, you have to spend some time before you even assign the project. You have to set aside some class time, or even if you're in an online class, give resources just as Larry is giving resources about how to work in teams. You have to give students resources to know what it means to work in teams. Just because you place students into groups does not mean that you are teaching them how to work as teams with clear and defined goals. So you have to emphasize the importance and relevance of teams. The importance of teams is that 80% of organizations across different industries utilize teams to get things done. So students need to really understand that in the workforce, regardless of what field they're entering, what their technical expertise will be, the way of the workplace is to work in teams. I work in teams, we all work in teams. We're on committees, to get things done, so that it will be no different for the students. So they need to understand that beyond the technical expertise of whatever you're doing, employees look first and foremost, all their interview questions are to ascertain how do you work interpersonally with others? Do you know how to collaborate with others? Do you know how to be a team player? So that's one of the things. So working in teams is really relevant. For me, working, teaching business courses, businesses look, when they're looking for people to manage and lead teams, they're looking for people with MBA skills. They feel like if you say you have an MBA, that you will be able, you should be one of the best people on the teams because you should know how to lead and manage a team. So we have quite a bit of expectation to really be relevant in that regard. And number two, teaching team development. So there's actually literature on team development and teamwork skills, and students need to understand that the team development is a process. And so Tuckman, 1965, it's an article that, and it's been it's been updated over the years or whatever, but there are stages that students will go through when they're working in teams, and if you tell them this beforehand, they won't be so shocked when it happens. So basically, forming, storming, norming, all of this is part of the process. So you have to explain to students, at the beginning when there are certain considerations when you're actually forming the team, and then after you form this team, you have to, do certain things to help to norm the team to get used to working with each other. And then just when you think you have it together, you're gonna have some conflicts. It's just a part of the stages of working in a team. So I give students, information, I give them articles by Tuckman and others that talk about the different stages. I actually teach it. I don't have a whole lot of, be mindful, I don't have a whole lot of time to teach teams, but just whatever information, even if you just make them briefly aware of it, it helps, because then they begin to know that what they're going through is normal for all types of teams. Okay, and then number three, it's important to conduct team building exercises. And you conduct team building exercises to make the teams cohesive. You need them to work as a cohesive unit in order to accomplish whatever it is that you want them to accomplish. So some team building exercises that I do, it's like little fun stuff that doesn't take a lot of time, like naming your team. The students, the teams in my classes, they have to create a business plan, and of course they have a name for their business, but I want them to have a name for their team. And it's kind of like a team identity type of thing. And it's just a fun and quick exercise to do, to where they are kind of forming as one and identifying as one. And then you could do things like, of course, it's always important to do some type of self-disclosure activity in team building so that students can get to know each other really well. So some type of thing to, relate facts about each other, different working styles, fun facts, little known facts, just whatever that could make the students get to know each other a bit more would be good for team building. You could have some type of problem-solving activity that does not have anything to do with the actual project that they're gonna work on, just to kind of get them in gear for solving problems together. So it's really important to have some type of team building exercise built in right at the beginning of class before they even get into working in their teams. And then number 4 is, as professors, we have to give some thought to the method of team formation. So teams can be formed by, they can be professor selected, or they could be student selected. And, this is like the really vague part of working in teams. There's no, either way it's gonna be random. Professor selected more resembles the actual workplace, because when you're in the workplace, you don't get to select your teams. But it's also different from the workplace, because for me, if I'm gonna assign students to a team, it's pretty much gonna be random. I don't know the students, I don't know enough about them and their strengths and their weaknesses I don't have that much time with them to be able to put them in teams in any other fashion other than some random type fashion. And so in the workplace, you're going to do maybe cross-functional teams where you get someone from, the different areas that you need to contribute to the project, and you kind of know something about the work ethic and the what these people are able to produce and everything like that. But in the classroom, you don't have that luxury, so it will pretty much end up being random. And so in student selected teams in the classroom are effective as well. With student selected teams, students they don't harbor so much resentment towards the professor. It actually kind of makes it easier for the professor to do the grading and everything, because there's no responsibility on the part of the professor for being blamed for putting this team together. So I kind of like the student selected teams, and it's random too. Student selected teams are very random because they don't know each other very well either, and it ends up being, they're choosing their friends or people that they've worked with before, or people who sit in close proximity to them in class or something like that. It's still random, but to me, the student selected teams work out best, because you'll see, in my later discussion, that it's also a problem, how to evaluate teams. So from my perspective, if I didn't put the team together, then I can more easily evaluate them. But it also depends on the project. In my class, I told you I have 2 different projects. In one of my projects, I do a random selection and assign the students to teams, okay? But in my other project, I let them self-select. Okay, assign a reasonable workload with clear goals. So of course you have to have your project set up, and you have to have rubrics and what you want them to accomplish and things like that. If you don't have that set up, if you haven't done the work as a professor on that end, then it's going to cause a lot of problems, negative problems for your students. Number 6, requiring teams to have specific roles. And Destiny talked about how important that is. It's important for students to know and understand who's going to do what. And it's not all about just splitting up the work and taking turns. You do this, you do. They all need to be responsible for the whole project, but at the same time, they need to have roles within that. And then number 7 is provide some class time for team meetings. So you need to see these teams in actions yourself at some point in time, because for me, when I see the teams in action, when I have meetings with the teams, then I can see different dynamics that are going to cause problems later. And they get to ask you questions as a team and to see what your response will be to it. So, you need to see these teams in action, so let them have some class time for working if possible. And then number 8 is requesting interim reports and feedback from the teams. So don't let the project just be turned in at the end of the semester and you haven't had any points along the way to kind of see the work that they're developing. So it could be that, maybe for me, I have project proposals, you have to turn that in, and then a rough draft or whatever, but you need some points so that you can see the contributions or lack thereof well before the final project is due. And then number 9, requiring team members to keep a personal contributions journal. That helps a lot, because at the end of the day, if they're not writing down their contributions, sometimes, students have the tendency to overclaim credit, to say that they're doing a whole lot, but when you really look at it, they're not really doing a lot. And it helps to share these logs with the team members so that everybody can feel like the work is being done in an equitable manner. And also, if someone is writing something down that they really haven't done, then if they're sharing it with the team members, they'll be less likely to do that type of thing. And then last, peer evaluation. You have to use detailed peer evaluation for these projects. That was one of the things that I had the most problems with. The peer evaluation is 20% of their grade for the entire class. So they are really depending on their team members. They're really held accountable for working in teams. And so they needed some detailed feedback that the students could actually see what the feedback was and it still be confidential. So what I had to help me out with that, and you may want to write this down, I use CATME.org. CATME.org, and they have a lot of resources on that website for placing students into teams, and then they actually have an online peer evaluation system. And another thing about peer evaluation is you should do multiple points within the semester for peer evaluation so that students can start to see how their peers feel about them before the end of the project, so that they can straighten it out if they need to, or whatever they need to do. Those are my 10 suggestions, and that's all I have.
Good morning. I'm impressed with people that get up so early to come learn more about how to do your jobs. It's very impressive. So thanks for the opportunity to be here and to share with you. It's interesting how we all overlap in our ideas, and we have some of the ideas that are same and redundant, and some of the ideas that are complementary. So my perspective is that I've been here at TWU for 10 years, and I'm an associate professor of biology. One of the parts of my job that I really love is that I teach the large freshman biology class. This is the first majors class that they take when they come here to be biology majors. And that class can be up to 250 students. As a part, because it's a core class, I'm required to do assessment of how they work in teams. Any of the rest of you teach core classes and have this responsibility. So you know that it's not just because we think it's a good idea, it's because we have to. We have to be able to give documentation to the state of Texas as to how well we're teaching students to work in teams. And that sort of is supported by the ideas that I heard from these others, that working in teams is important because when they go out into the workforce, this is an expectation. So we must teach them mindfully. In my class this semester, I have 165 freshmen. Some of them are not freshmen. They're more mature, but regardless, this is all their first biology course. And they will be working in teams. I may have as many as 30 teams going on at the same time, and that leads to some management issues. So the model that I've adopted that I'd like to talk to you about today is called team-based learning. There's a book. So if you're interested in learning more, I don't know, Ivan, can you get a screenshot of that book for people to be able to see? I'm sorry, I moved it while you were focusing on it probably. And this book was written by Larry Michelson, who was a business professor at the University of Oklahoma, and the idea originated in the 1970s, and there is now an organization that you can investigate if it becomes interesting, called the Team-Based Learning Collaborative. So if you Google the term team-based learning, you'll find that group. They have resources, they have chat opportunities, so you can send out a query and the group members of the group can send back responses. I'm a member of this group, and they have annual meetings where you can go and share scholarship and ideas. So Larry Michelson was a business professor at the University of Oklahoma in the 1970s, and the reason he invented team-based learning, his particular model, is that his class size went from 40 to 120 in one semester. He had worked in teams, much like I heard described by these others, but suddenly he had so many teams that it became cumbersome. So what he was looking for was a prescriptive way in which to guide these people in the teams, a model that he could lead them through. So the team-based learning model that was founded by Larry Michelson has a basic formula. I like formulas. Maybe it's because I'm a left-brain science person, but I like something that is predictable and reliable, that I can explain to my students, and they can see the model. It's very transparent. So one of those, the learning cycle includes 4 basic steps, and the first step is pre-class preparation. So the students would need to either read something, watch a video, or even attend your previous lecture so they have some basic content knowledge with which to function in their group. And then the second step is called readiness assurance. And this is all in the book, by the way, so if you're looking for the reference to find this information, you can find it readily. Readiness assurance simply means that first there's individual accountability. And in my class, that takes the form of an individual quiz. My students know they walk in the room on this particular day, the first thing they're going to do is sit down and take a 10-question multiple choice quiz with questions that are based on that content material. The goal being to see if they understand the concept, the basic content information well enough to function on what's coming next. The second thing that happens is as soon as they finish that quiz, they sit down with their team members, which have been assigned to them. So they sit with their team, they have a folder in which their materials are presented, they take the same quiz again. Some of you may have heard of the scratch-off form. That's the Epstein International published form. It's sort of like a lottery ticket. So the team answers the same questions, but this time they have to vote as a group on what is the right answer. And they get bonus points in my class for how many of these they can get on the first try. This leads to some discussion and peer teaching in the group so that the students have to agree on which is the right answer before they do the little scratch. Because if they scratch wrong, then they lose points. So the peer teaching comes in as they sort of struggle with, well, I think it's A, no, I think it's B. Well, why do you think it's A? Why do you think it's B? And that leads to some of these, uncovers misconceptions of knowledge and misunderstandings. And what you do is you plant those questions in your quiz because you know what they're going to stumble on. So put those questions there that they'll have to struggle and teach each other. And so once we've got the readiness assurance completed, we move into something called an application exercise. The application exercise is something that takes their content knowledge and applies it to a real world situation. What I use are case studies, and I have a place that I find these called from the University of Buffalo, New York. This is science case studies, so if you're in a different field, you'll need to find your own resources, and therein lies the biggest problem, is finding these really good application exercises to give them something meaty and rich and relevant to work on that actually uses your concepts. And then the final part of this is very important. My students I have to tell them that this is the important part because otherwise they think they're done when they finish with their application exercise. And that is that you must put this application exercise in such a form that they have to make a decision as a team, come to a consensus, and take a stand. And once they've done that, then you can call for a vote. What is your team vote of these choices? And they have to take a stand. And this can be in the form of using a voting card. A, B, C, or D is one way to do it. Once you've had them take a stand, then, and this is where the magic happens, you have them do an inter-team discussion. Okay, team, I see you voted A. Somebody that voted B, let's hear why you made these particular selections. Do you agree with team A? Do you agree with team B? And being that facilitator of discussion, for me as a faculty member, is one of the hardest skills of all. Not telling the answer, but letting them tell each other what the answer they think is correct and why. So that's the basic cycle. You would do that on a concept set and then start over again. In my class, I do this about 6 times in the semester, so every day is not a team day, but it's done in class with this particular learning cycle. The students come to expect it, they know how it's going to work, and that's comforting to them, especially when you have over 30 groups going on at the same time, and they're freshmen. This is a very helpful framework with which to work. So, what makes this work? One of the first things, and we disagree a little bit on this point, is that I believe in making strategically formed teams, not self-selected teams. This may be different when you have people who are graduate students in business and when you have freshmen. My freshmen, if I let them do self-selected teams, I would find that all the honor students found each other because they'd met each other, and all the kinesiology majors would find each other. And we'd have these very homogeneous teams where friends have found friends, and they're very comfortable with that, just like we would do if we had the opportunity. So do something to make your teams heterogeneous, that is diverse and permanent, so they're working with the same people during the whole semester. There's simple ways you can do this. For example, if you've ever gone to a team-based learning workshop, you've probably experienced this. They'll say, okay, all of the people who are kinesiology majors come up and stand in a line. And then they'll put the biology majors, and then they'll put the nutrition majors. And then we count off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people are going on to separate teams. So you're dispersing your people with different majors and intermixing them on teams. I hope that makes sense. There's different ways to do this, but I think it's important to have diverse teams so that you don't have cliques and you have people that are working with people different from themselves with different talent sets. Another thing that needs to happen, and this is redundant with what you've heard before, is there needs to be some kind of team accountability. So in a classroom with freshmen and 30 teams going on, what I do is have them sit down on the first day and they have a little form to fill out that they have to write down 5 things they want from each other. So setting team expectations. And I know what they're going to say. I could tell them the 5 things I want from them, but they need to come up with them themselves. They want everybody to show up to class. They want them to be prepared. They want them to speak up, and they want them to listen. Those are 4 things that are pretty predictable. But they may throw in something new that I haven't heard of before. But at least it's their idea. And then we have all of our materials in folders that they keep from week to week. That piece of paper they filled out gets stapled inside of the folder to remain there for the whole semester so that they remember, and I can remind them, you had some agreements with each other. Be sure you respect each other, your agreements. And then peer assessment is also an important part of this. I do peer assessment twice in the semester, once at midterm and once at the end. I don't count it as a part of the grade, and it is anonymous, meaning that I know what they said about each other at the end, but they don't know. At the middle term, I let them share out with each other. I loved the ideas that you shared about communication because that's a weakness in faculty. We're not trained to be psychological experts in working with people in teams, so I learned some things. I'm going to read your handouts very carefully so that I can be a better facilitator. I think one of the most important things, in addition to what I've said, is organization. I have a lot of moving parts in my class. It could get very messy. what I found is that the two things that help me very most are being organized in time. And I learned this through the 10 years I've been doing teams in my class, that I have to publish a timeline for my students. When you arrive at 11, and this goes on Blackboard, they get it in advance, and it's the same every time. When you arrive at 11 o'clock, the first thing you will do is take an individual quiz. That will last for 10 minutes. At 11:10, you will turn in your paper, and we will move to your teams, pick up your folders, and do your team quiz. That will last for 15 minutes. At 11, you see how this goes? And it's very structured. Now that sounds sort of controlling, but I found if I don't do that, they can spend the whole 2 hours on their team quiz doing the little scratch-off thing. They love that scratch-off thing, and they can argue forever. But you put a time limit on it. And so I think having that time limit, and I even put a timer up on the wall. And sometimes if I can see that we're really running long and there's a good reason, I'll reset the timer and budget another 5 minutes if they need it. But come up with some kind of a timeline, publish it, make it very transparent, and let the students know what the limitations are so that they can finish their work in class. And the second thing is to distribute materials. I mean, this is something that's essential. Each team has a manila folder with their team number, team 1, team 2, and so forth. And inside that folder, all the materials they need for class that day will be kept, and they're color-coded, so they know that the pink thing is the activity and the blue thing is the evaluation sheet, and so forth. So come up with a system that works for your students, and then use the same thing every single time, because the students love to know what you expect of them. I make sure that my assignments are very structured so that the students know beforehand they're supposed to read things. I put them out on Blackboard in advance. And then what are they supposed to accomplish during class? Also very structured. And a grading scheme is included along with the assignment, so they know how many points does my team get for this and for this and for this. And then when you need to evaluate the team and come up with a grade for the day, I only grade the team folder. I don't have to grade 200 and some. I grade 30 of them. I can grade 30. I can't grade 200 very many times. So having the materials and the time organized are crucial, I think. And then I think this is probably the most important thing of all, and that is to choose what you're asking your teams to do very wisely, because they won't buy in if they don't see that this is an important task. And I came up with 4 ideas that I use when I'm judging and picking the activity that I'm going to select for my team. And the first thing, because we're supposed to be teaching something, make sure that it's learning objective based. So what was it you wanted them to know and be able to do? If you wanted them to know and be able to identify the effects of osmosis, that's a biology word, then pick an activity that emphasizes that concept. And so once you've got it learning objective aligned, then think about the case or whatever it is you're using to have them work on. Is it relevant to them? So I could pick something on osmosis that had to do with something that happened in the 17th century that I think is really interesting, but they won't care. It's better to pick a newspaper article out of 2 years ago's magazine or newspaper or something that is really relevant that they can buy into. So pick something that not because you think it's cool, because they will think it's cool. And I call that being relevant. Will they care about this? Can they buy into it? So first you've got, is it student learning objective aligned? Is it relevant? And then two other things you need to think about. And one is it age appropriate? So what's good for her graduate students is not going to work for my freshmen. I have to be careful that this is aligned to the particular students that are in my room, and I kind of know who they are. They're freshmen. They're smart, they're thinkers. They don't have a whole lot of background in biology, so I need to make sure that it's age appropriate. And then the last thing of all, and this is the killer, it has to be time appropriate. If you give them a 3-hour assignment, 1 hour and 20 minutes to do it, you will have rebellion on your hands. So, because I have my students do this group assignment within the class, it's not a take-home and it's not a continuous project over a semester, it's a unit. I have to be careful. So how do I get this information about these 4 things? I ask my students. We call it the blue sheet. Every time they get a new assignment, these 6 times, there's the blue sheet, and the blue sheet says, rank this assignment at the end by your team. Is it relevant to you? Is it content appropriate for what you're learning in this class? Was it age appropriate, do you think, for your class? And was the time appropriate? Guess which one I get dinged on the most? Time. It's time. So I have to be very careful to give them a compact assignment that gets the job done, but doesn't go on longer than they really have. Something that helps with this is to put the materials out in advance so they have a chance to review it before they come to class, read the materials, and know what's going to be expected. So those are the things I had to share. If you're interested in more information, I'm not selling this book, but it's got a lot more good information about how to get teams to work in the setting in which I work, and it works cross-disciplinary. I teach people in K-12 to use this as well as university level, and it would work in graduate school too. So,
Okay, so we have time for questions.
What's a good practical upper limit on team size for the classroom from anybody?
I'd say 5 to 7. Bigger than 7 gets to be unwieldy.
I agree with that, but I've limited mine to 6. Sometimes I have more opportunity for social learning if it's too big over 6.
I have a little attrition, so if I make my teams too small to start and a few drop out, then the teams become too small. I think a group of 3 is not a good number, and 4 is a little bit small, so that's why I think 5 is probably a nice number.
I have a question about conflict. If conflict does happen in a group. So last semester I had one student come to me and say another student didn't want to work with Spanish speakers. This was a second language acquisition class. The students were in training to become language teachers. And I wasn't sure what to do, how to handle that. Then I had other situations where I knew that students were not asking for what they needed or speaking what they wanted from others. So when do you intervene, and what's the best way to do it?
Well, I'll jump in just a little bit before we fill into gaps, but I think it's really important. This is why I think the pre-form time is really important in terms of setting the group up for success. So that's why like a group contract where like you put an item in for like, how will we deal with conflict already gets them thinking about it before it even happens. And so they can have at least some idea about like as a group what agreement they've made. I think that's part of it. I think, if it is something, I think also as an instructor, you can sort of help to mediate them. And so for people who don't have the communication skills that they need to do it, I think you can model that for them, like kind of be mediator in that way between the two of them. That's fine.
Haven't spoken yet to culture. You did address age. I'm in a particular situation right now where 7 out of the 9 students are international students from different countries and didn't know each other. A few did, but and that's an extreme example. But in a class of 100, your cultural mix is high. So I'm just wondering how you address that, because we're noticing right away that some of our students are not comfortable with expressing their own needs or whatever. That's very Western, and our students aren't Western.
My classes are a little unique in that these are executive, and they work in diverse. They're more exposed to diverse contexts than maybe people freshmen in Sandra's class. So it depends on the level of the students and the content. So I don't have much experience with students not being used to that person.
One structural idea that might help, and I haven't done this in the past, but I'm considering to do it this semester, is to assign roles within the group. This is a very K-12 idea, you know, where we're the recorder, the reporter, the such as that.
We're going that direction.
But I think I'm going to try it this semester to choose particular roles and have the students select or randomly assign roles within the group, and then the next time shift the roles. Because we all know there's that person that loves to grab the pencil and take over. In fact, I'm not even going to bother to ask the rest of you. I'm just going to write the answers because it's the most efficient way. And somebody that's culturally different from that person may not feel they can speak up and say, I'd like to talk too, or I'd like to share too. But if they became the pencil holder, then they'd automatically have a role of leadership in the group. I'm not sure if this is a perfect solution, but it might be one way to impose some structure. It's very difficult in a class with 30 groups to walk around and monitor. And the first time you see evidence of this is when you've got the one person who's moved off and they're this, and they're sitting by themselves. But if they had a role in the group where they couldn't sit with their arms crossed and isolating themselves, maybe that would help. I don't know, what do you think? Have you done that, Desiree?
I've done the role definition in classes before. I think most times that we do tend to kind of keep it throughout the semester, but I like the changing around. A lot of my experience has been research, so I know myself when I've led the project, it's kind of delegating, especially when I'm not there. I'm in class and I need someone to do data collection for me. You know, I've got everything printed out beforehand. Yeah, I like the role definition and knowing the expectations of that role and what expectations are expected of me beforehand going into the project. So and a lot of the research I've done, we meet before the project even starts to kind of alleviate all of that beforehand. I haven't had much experience in regards to working with different cultures, but I think role
Great
definition.
experience.
Yeah.
Very global learning.
But I've come to learn role definition is so key. That's why I included it in my little spiel here. So yeah, I like that. Who's doing what and what are the expectations of that role.
I've been thinking about peer feedback, and so I maybe have like 1.5 questions. One is just about if you, to what extent you might guide students in how to give that feedback so that they're not, so that it can be constructive. And also I think, I can't remember, someone mentioned it was anonymous, which indicated that the peers would get to see their students would get to see their peers' feedback. And is that how you incorporate, exposing peers to exposing students to what their peers are, the feedback they're giving? Does that make sense?
Okay, so I can answer that because that's one of the main problems that I had. So, and I heavily rely on the CATME peer evaluation system right now. The CATME peer evaluation has a calibration exercise to where students have to go through to actually teach them how to evaluate each other. So not only do they evaluate themselves twice within the semester, once at midterm and once at the end, but before they ever do it for midterm, they have to go through this calibration exercise for the survey itself. And the system will tell me things like, okay, there's a clique in this team, and it'll give me advice about, what they're trying to uncover about this clique and how to kind of let the students know that there's potential for cliques in this team, or people who overrate each other or underrate each other, or overrate themselves or underrate themselves. So that calibration exercise helps me to know what to expect, and it helps the students to know what to expect with the peer evaluation instrument itself. And then as far as the actual feedback, so the students take a survey, the exercise is a survey. And then this survey, there's a result, you can release the results to the students. It's still anonymous as far as who said what within the team, but it's gonna give you an average rating for the team and explain to you what that means to you about how some tips for you working in a team based on the feedback that your team members gave you. So if, for instance, it could come back with a suggestion, maybe your average team rating for your communication was low. And it'll give you some suggestions on what you need to do to improve communication. So they get feedback and they know specifically what the feedback is, but they don't know who it's from. It's an average rating from the team. And I found that very helpful. Other than previous to that, I was giving surveys and then I would get the results and I couldn't give any information to the students. It's like, oh no, it's confidential. And I couldn't, the students were left wondering, well, what did I do? Like, why did I get so low or whatever? This one, the results are released to them. So I found that very helpful.
Is it qualitative and quantitative, or do the students just get numbers? Like, are group members allowed to type out words?
It's quantitative and qualitative in that the average rating is based on an average of the quantitative, and it gives you, the qualitative feedback.
Is it free response or is it multiple choice?
The response is it's not gonna give you the specific response from any student. So the students give me open-ended feedback with it, but the students, they're not gonna see that because 9 times out of 10, they will know who said that. The system has, the system develops the feedback for them. Like, if you didn't have good time management skills and you were rated low in time management, well, the system has advice for you, but it's not from the students. It's just overall advice from that program.
So if they get a low rating on time management, it triggers a certain
response
from the computer.
Right, from the computer, right. But it's no specific, I get the open-ended response for the student, and that is held confidential, but the system gives some advice.
This used to be a free program.
It's not free
anymore.
It's not free anymore. My department is paying for it though, because more and more faculty are using it, but it's not free anymore. Hopefully, the university will. Hopefully, the university will buy it. There's university.
Our friend, I agree with you. Our friend took her something because it cost money.
Really?
Yeah, because they're used to say like that.
Yeah. I love it. I don't know what I'll do if it goes away.
Another instrument, we use TBL. I just wanted to tell you, if you all are using Stephen Brookfield CIQ, our main TBL faculty fellow just introduced it in her class. It's the critical incident questionnaire. It's on stephenbrookfield.com, if you're all aware of this work. It's feedback to you that I find invaluable. I've put it online and you get it, and they can do it in like 3 minutes. But if you get it after every class or every 3rd or 4th class, you get amazing results about their how they're individually doing with the class and when they felt engaged, when they felt distanced, that kind of thing. So, and he'll let you redo the words and so forth.
Price it appropriately for your particular students.
Yeah, I contacted him. He's a wonderful scholar.
And all of our advice is dependent on the type of class that you have. Like I did attend the team-based learning seminar, and it's a really organized concept for guiding teams and everything. But I couldn't use it because my teams are not face-to-face. I mean, my classes are not all face-to-face. My classes are hybrid, and they meet mostly online, but some face-to-face. So I couldn't use it, but I thought it was a really good exercise to use. So all of this varies according to the format